It's 2025 and a new year means brand new opportunities. And for a lot of you out there, I know you've been thinking about one thing over the holidays, and that is starting your own business. But you have so many questions like how do I get started? How do I come up with a brand? How do I even sell stuff to people? And what am I even going to sell? Now take a deep breath. Shopify has got you. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. And you can get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. You don't have to be a coding nerd or a design geek to get this done. All you need to do is drag and drop. Shopify also helps with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard, so you can focus on the important stuff, like growing your business. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/truecrime, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/truecrime to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/truecrime.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is The Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Welcome to the show, Bob Motta. So
Thank
wonderful to have you back. We're just going to start recording another show, y'all.
Yeah, there you go. What did you think, Bob? Were you surprised?
Are you like ready to pop like any second? Is that what's happening?
There's like an eviction date. There's like an eviction date.
Yeah, I think I was 2 weeks past due for my mother. Like at the time, a long time ago, I was like the heaviest baby that was ever born at this Westlake hospital. So yeah, I hope that happens for you sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Me too. But the race for the verdict won. What do you think about the Alec Murdaugh verdict?
I was surprised at the speed of it. I thought that, to me, it gave me relief, to be honest with you, because I was just sitting there. I'm like, the hardest thing for me to try to like grasp as a human being, like stripping away the lawyer part of it, was like that this guy could kill his own son. You know, it's just so hard. I can't compute it. It just will. No matter how hard I try, I cannot make it compute. It's just such a crazy thing for apparently like no reason. You know, it's like whether you buy the motive or you don't, and if it's true, it's a terrible reason to kill your kid. There's no viable excuse for doing that. So to me, it actually gave me great relief. You know, it kind of took away like the trepidation, because I just kept sitting there. I'm like, man, if I was on this jury, I don't know what I'd do. Like, you know, it's like everything adds up that it's him. You know, but it's like I just can't.
You don't want to believe it because
I don't want to believe it.
Right?
It was like so hard for me to believe.
And that's Bob. That's so insightful, because this is tragic for everyone. Like, it's tragic for us as a society that this can happen. That this man, the evidence is overwhelming that he did this.
I mean,
like,
nothing else.
This man, he did this.
Nothing else made sense. It's like.
So when do you think they lost the case?
I think ultimately, that it was the little detective's video was just an absolute gut shot that could never, you know, I mean, when you couple it with the lie, you know, you could not, like, as soon as the jury heard that, it was done. He was done. I didn't care what was said after it. I know, you know, I kept talking about, you know, the fact that the jurors didn't have notebooks, but the only thing they had to remember is that he was down at the kennels and he lied about it. At the end of the day, and Allison, and I agree with her, I think the fact that the clothes that he was wearing in the first video, that they vanished off the face of the earth, was pretty damning. You know, I mean, because I was telling Allison, I'm like, man, the guy could have just gone and like gotten the same damn shirt. He had a year, you know, he didn't even do that. It's like, that's how, you know, confident he was in his, you know, in all his narcissistic, you know, BS. But I was like, man, you know, so I think that those two factors alone for a jury, when you see that, and I have to be honest, I think that there's this probably overwhelming hatred of the Murdaugh family in that county, just because they've been running it for 100 years. And, you know, when people are in that kind of power, other people resent that. especially regular folk around that area have to be like, man, I'm like over the Murdaughs running it, So when they started throwing in the 404B stuff, which everyone on that jury knew anyway, it's like for us, Brett and Alice, it was like an amazing thing to watch in a trial like that, because it was like fascinating to see that battle and to have those offers of proof and all that stuff come on and happen. And all in the meantime, everyone in that county and that town knew exactly who they were. They knew what all the stories were. None of them were surprised by anything that they heard at trial in terms of the backstory. So for me, I just felt like I think that even if they were hedging on guilt or innocence, or not even innocence, just that they weren't sure about whether or not he did it, everything else combined in terms of them being just tired of this guy was enough to have them. It was a super easy decision. They're like, this guy is beyond awful. And I'm like heavy leaning guilty anyway. So any thought of me being swayed the other way is garbage. Like, I'm not going to even contemplate it, So that's how I feel about it.
The last time that we talked, it was right before the prosecution rested. And so we hadn't talked about the defense. So as a defense attorney, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Alec Murdaugh taking the stand and how you've heard what we think about it and how it came off, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on him taking the stand and whether that, shot himself in the foot or made it, obviously didn't do him that good for favors.
No, look, I mean, you guys know as well as I do. I mean, I'm sure Jim and Poot tried to talk him out of it vehemently, like there's no way you can help yourself with this thing, man. Like, and he, which was probably par for the course, was the smartest guy in the room. And he's like, nah, man, I'm going to fix this. Don't worry about it. I'm going to get up there. I'm going to be able to explain it, blah, 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 blah. And Brett, when you had tweeted, like I had made that that was the only way he could have approached it, exactly what you tweeted. And I had said that on Law and Crime the other day. I'm like, that is the only viable excuse, where he just comes and flat out just admits, look, man, I knew I was going to be the guy. I'm a former prosecutor. I know how this game is played. I'm the husband, I'm the father. I discovered the bodies. I was the last one to see him. I'm the suspect. I wasn't willing to give him anything else. So that's it. So I think that once he decided to do it, and then once he had married himself to this concept of paranoia from the pills, and I didn't trust SLED, I'm like, he's done. I'm like that, because that was the only thing that I thought in my mind that he could help himself with, is if he could sell that to the jury to where they bought it, because like I had tweeted what if I was Creighton Waters, what my final statement in the closing would have been, and what's the last guy's name? Mopser. Like, I call him the identical guy from My Cousin Vinny, because he reminded me so much of that dude. Man. Identical, like his camper, the way he looked. I was like, it's him.
Matters.
But he was great. Like out of all the closings, I thought he was just super effective. I thought he was the guy who really drove it home. I thought he was the perfect offset for Griffin, because Griffin, like Poot, he's not from there. It's like he has that, stuffed suit, pompous defense lawyer thing about him. And I don't think that he would have resonated with the jury anyway. But like you guys said, that was done. Closings were an exercise of futility. They had all made up their minds long before closings. They probably could have stopped the case right after they introduced the video and got the same exact verdict,
Well, and somebody said in the chat that it's ironic that Paul solved his own murder. And I think that's true. I think my wife and I were talking about this. Without the video, I don't think he's convicted. Not necessarily. I mean, maybe he would be anyway. Without the video, yeah, maybe. Without the video, he doesn't testify, and there's no proof that he's at the scene. There's some circumstantial evidence, like, the phone's off and like all the other stuff. But that was such a huge part of it. And without that video, I think he walks.
It's those guys who they think picked up the hose. That's what still keeps me.
Yeah, the hose ended up being a red herring, right? Because when he testified, it was like, oh, but like when you listen to the video, you can hear either Paul or Maggie was using the hose. So like how it got put up ended up not being a thing, or at least that's the way I construed it. Like, when I saw the video, like for the first time, and I could actually hear, because when they first played it, I could not hear a word that anybody was saying, and everyone was just like, that's Alex. But by the end of the trial, the sound was very clear to me. And I know that I heard the hose being sprayed. So that to me became kind of a non-factor.
But Alex, pick a hose up. It's already on the ground.
Okay, he's guilty. Relax, calm down.
So,
Alex.
Bob, I'm curious. What would you have done with? I agree. The video was incredibly. I mean,
To me, it was
the silver bullet, right? What would you
Absolutely.
have done with that piece of evidence as the defense attorney?
Man, like I think the only thing that you could have done was like it because you can't look at the video without combining it with the lie. You know, they became so intertwined that, you know, and obviously his attorneys knew going in that was a major problem. They knew in terms of going into that case, the one thing we're going to have to deal with, our biggest weakness, the strongest piece of evidence they have, is that they have you down at the kennels and you lied about it. So how do we deal with it? And the only way that I could think to deal with it is to get the jury to the place where they can understand where a person in that position. And it was tough with Murdaugh because he had lied so much about everything that it becomes like the impossible task. It's like you have to be Hercules in order to get, you know, people to move mountains, in order to get people to believe that he's not lying about that one thing when he's lied about everything else for the last 20 years. And it's like you've got, you know, but like the reality is like if I walked home, God forbid, and my wife and my kids were killed and I was the last one to see them and I'm the one who's calling it in, I know I am the suspect. And if I had something like man, do I put myself, you know, within 5 minutes of the murders or don't I, if I don't know that I'm going to get caught about it? I mean, I might lie about it just out of self-preservation, not me per se, but just in general. You know, I think that might be a human response. But, you know, getting over the mountain of lies for decades is impossible. You know, I mean, the guy was just an awful human being.
He was, and that hurt him, right? But the thing that surprised me, Bob, and you heard our discussion of this, but to me, there are 2 points that I would have made. Number one is the one you just made, and we talked about this, that say that, look, I knew I'd be the main suspect, and the only thing that mattered to me was finding out who killed my wife and son. And I wasn't going to give SLED another reason to think it was me. So I lied about that. I wanted them to go out and find out who did it, not focus on me. And that was a mistake, and I shouldn't have done that. That'd have been the first thing. The second thing, and what was weird about this, is for like 30 seconds in the closing, this point was made by Jim. And that's if you want to see how Murdaugh feels about his family, look at the fact that he tried to kill himself to help out Buster. I would have combined those two and sort of made that my argument. I mean, look, maybe it was just
because your one little twist there at the end is key to that selling the lie, where I really want them to be able to figure out who killed my family. So I didn't want me to become the fixture. I didn't want them to tunnel vision onto me. That's a crucial part of it that had to have been said, you know.
And then the defense can say, and guess what they did? They tunnel visioned on him. He was 100% right.
Exactly.
But then that explains the mountain of evidence. Of course, there's a mountain of evidence when you haven't dug anywhere else. You didn't take DNA off their clothes. You didn't go here. You didn't go there. You didn't go to all the places that other mountains of evidence existed because you were tunnel visioned on me. And I know this because I'm a lawyer. I get it. I've tried criminal cases. I wanted you to find the killer and you haven't. And now he's out there somewhere. And I'll sit here all day long to find justice for my sweet Paw Mags. I mean, that's how you do it, right? But and I, you're going to be our defense attorney of the year,
right?
What happened with closing? What happened? What do you think happened? Not the actual argument. What do you think happened behind the scenes before Griffin kind of choked? And then I'd also like to hear how you would have argued it.
I think that. Obviously there had to have been a massive conversation between Poot and Griff and Murdaugh in terms of like, okay, who's doing this? And I think fundamentally, like throughout the course of the trial, I personally liked Griffin's style better for where they were trying the case. In terms of, I thought he was just more relatable to the jury. He just came off, he's a little more homespun. He's from the area. I think that the jury would relate to him, whereas Poot is not that guy. He's the snarky, making offhand comments guy, getting an occasional laugh, but blustered, so I think ultimately they landed on Jim. And I think that, like, I agreed. I was on early enough, Alice, to where I heard you kind of saying, like, he just was all over the map. Like, he should have picked a lane and said, okay, look, this is what I'm going to do. This is what we're going to say. If you're, like you said, if I'm going to attack the police work, that's what I'm going to stick with the whole way. Yes, I'll mention the other things. But in terms of kind of just checking off things, like, okay, so they said this is how we rebut it. Check. You said this is how we're going to rebut it. And that was, and it just came off like very haphazard to me. Like in the beginning, I thought that he was doing a nice job. And then ultimately, by the end of it, I just, because like I was live tweeting. And so I was seeing the reaction of people that weren't me, who were lay people that weren't an attorney, because we always look at stuff through the viewfinders of attorneys. We can't turn that off. It's just built into us. So I always look at it like that. So, but the more I kept reading, and people were just like, I can't stand Jim. Like, he's stuttering and saying and stammering, and I can't stand it. And like, I can't even I can't listen to it. And I was like, and he's going so slowly. I started to realize, I'm like, all right, like I have to kind of look at it from a different perspective, because I thought, at least in the first half hour, that he was hitting some high notes. I thought that he was doing a pretty decent job. And the longer it went on, the more I started to kind of see the point of view of the people, and the people are the people who represent the jury. Like that's the way I kept putting it on Twitter. I'm like, look, anything in this thread that we have going on Twitter, this is representative of the jury. We all observe things differently. We all perceive things differently. We all have our own life experiences, and that's how we all look at it. None of us look at something the same way, and we can have the exact same facts, and all three of us could look at it in a slightly different way. You know what I mean? So my thing would have been, I would have had to really, I would have worked on the lie the entire closing. That would have been like the entire focus of my closing, trying to offset that lie, trying to get them to somehow believe that this one time he's telling the truth, that he laid on his sword. He basically came in and gave an in-court confession to every financial crime that he is guilty of. And he did that for one reason and one reason only. And that was because he will go down for something that he did, and he'll take his medicine, but he's not going to go down for killing his wife and his son. I think he would have had to, I would have leaned into that hard, because to me, there was no other argument. The semantics of it all, like whether the brain came out of the bottom or, where the child was like, dude, I'm like, none of this makes any difference. It makes no difference on how they were. The only thing that would have made any difference potentially in light of the speed of the verdict, I don't know that would have made a difference anyway, but it would have been to really, really focus on the fact that this one time he didn't lie, that he didn't do this. But just, man, the timing of it was so hard, and like the only other thing I would have done, it's equally challenging to kind of try to figure out how he cleaned up so thoroughly, because really, if I'm the prosecution, I would say, well, they want to say that Sled was a little sloppy with this, but that really worked in favor of Alec Murdaugh, because he may not have cleaned up all that well, because he only had 4 to 5, 6 minutes to clean up. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I think no matter which way they would have handled it, the prosecution would have had a pretty good parry for it. So I don't know. It was a tough case. I just know I've tried cases like that, and it's exhausting for everybody. It's like the amount of work that was put in by both teams is just
Absolutely
monumental and exhausting.
Let me ask you this: psychologically,
baby tonight, man.
Yeah, you will. Psychologically,
they're still working though, because they have a sentencing tomorrow.
Well, there's not much to say.
He's not going to have to do too much work. That's going to be basically them trying to mitigate. But I don't know. He's getting, like Brett said, he's getting 2 lives. That's it. Period.
You think that the defense's position, and don't let me put words in your mouth, this isn't true, that Poot and Jim would have told him, do not testify?
100%.
And given that fact, what happens to you as a defense attorney when you've built up this entire case and you have a strategy and your client blows it all up on you because he insists on doing something like taking the stand? I know that you have to continue to work vigorously for him and all this other stuff, but psychologically, does that,
of course,
you feel that?
It takes the wind out of your sails, man. It's like everything that you've put together, and it's always like a game time decision whether or not somebody's going to testify. It's like, in terms of the defendant, it's always like, all right, let's see how their case in chief goes. Okay. Like we won't make the decision whether or not you're going to testify until the state's case in chief is over. And if they made a lot of headway and we feel like it's mandatory, then, maybe we'll talk about putting you on. And then it becomes, okay, how do we mitigate you being on the stand for potentially 2 days and not getting completely destroyed? Because look, there was never any point that I believe that Alec Murdaugh, because if they put him on and they knew that he did it, then they were suborning perjury. So I'm going to assume that they did not know, that he did not tell them, look, I did this. You got to help me get out of it. So let's assume that Jim and Poot didn't know. And so they're saying, all right, so we got to try to figure this out, and I'm assuming that they prepped him as much as they could with him being detained, but it's not going to be like the way you would want it in a perfect world and being able to, prep him. And, he was counting on his charm. I mean, there's one thing that you can say about the guy is the guy's a master manipulator. Like he was an unbelievable manipulator. And like, there were parts of the testimony where I was actually feeling emotional. Like I was buying what he was selling, knowing that he's just a habitual liar. So it's like that was kind of his superpower. And I really credit the jury for being able to overlook that and not buy into it because, the guy, like you can see how the guy settled cases for more, over value on all these PI cases. Like he was talking about how he justified, well, I asked my partner what he thought the case was worth. He said $100,000 and I got 400. So, well, I figured I made the extra 3. Why not steal it? It's like that's like his ability to be able to do that. Like, I don't think the guy was a great trial lawyer. I think he was a great schmoozer. I think that he could just talk. And I think that he was engaging in that way, like it just like scary like that, So I just think that ultimately at the end of the day, like you have to give all the credit to the jury in terms of being able to, whether it was a combination of like they were more than ready to end the Murdaugh reign of terror in that county for the last 100 years. And that played a part in it, which I'm sure it did, even if it was subconsciously, even if they're like, I feel like he did it, but they didn't exactly prove it beyond reasonable doubt, but it's super close to that. And the rest of it just makes it to the point where I feel very comfortable with calling him guilty. Because at the end of the day, he's doing just as much time on those on the financial charges. I had read somewhere that like if there were 3 particular charges that he was looking at life for 3 of them. And when he gets in front of a federal judge, that they abhor attorneys stealing from their clients more than anything on the planet, man. Like
that was a lot of charges stacked up. But
yeah, and then the judge was going to hammer him with whatever the max sentence would be in the, because it would have been a long time. So it was kind of like
let's. So Bob, you've talked about the psychological effect, that it would have on you as a person. I think people would love to hear this because we're getting to get inside, the defense attorney's mind, and a lot of people have asked, did Poot and did Griffin know that he did it? Even if they didn't ask him specifically and there wasn't the explicit, I did it. As the testimony is coming out, the evidence is getting pretty clear. Have you been in that situation where, you're defending someone who's absolutely done something heinous? How does that affect you psychologically? And how do you do your job effectively? Because I've heard some people say like, oh, he threw the closing because he knew that his client was guilty. Lawyers don't do that, right? Lawyers don't do that. I don't think defense attorneys do that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what that's like. When you sign up to be a defense attorney, a lot of your clients are going to be guilty. That is just kind of the name of the game. And you sign up on that job knowing that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you deal with that, how that affects you, and what goes through your mind as you're offering your vigorous defense, because everyone deserves it.
Right. So luckily for me, I was well armed to answer that question. Like going into being an attorney just by way of my father representing John Wayne Gacy. So as you can imagine, he got that question. That was the number one question I always asked of him. Like, was he a creep? How could you defend him? Like how morally, how did you check your morals at the door and be able to go in and do the job? And my dad's answer was simple, and I adopted it. And he defends the principles of the Constitution. He does not focus on the client. He focuses on the principles of the Constitution. He looks at the case. If there's motions to suppress or motions to quash that need to be filed early on in the case, that's what he does. He makes sure his job becomes to that point. Once you move past the motion phase, you're then concerned with, making sure that you're putting on the best defense that you can. It's like you're always able to find an avenue in terms of defending these people where you're able to look yourself in the mirror. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're not having to sell your soul to the devil, because, I mean, you guys know you're in the business. Most of the times the cops get it right. And if they've done the job right in terms of collecting the evidence, and they're going to survive motions early on, and their evidence is going to make it in, I mean, conviction rates are in the mid 90s for a reason. You know what I mean? It's like in the true crime world, it seems like we're constantly hearing about wrongful convictions and things of that nature, but they're not as frequent as everyone thinks. Typically they got the right guy, and typically they get convicted. I mean, those are kind of just facts. So it's like I was telling Brett, I think, Alice, before, the time that we all were together, the reality is that you want competent counsel on both sides so that victims' families don't have to go through the nightmare of a trial again because you had some schmuck on the defense that was just mailing it in. You know what I mean? So it's like you want everybody doing a good job on both sides of it. That way, justice is done properly one time. It's going to survive appeals, and it's not going to get kicked back for a retrial. So
let me ask you this, Bob.
Yeah,
there's a wrinkle in this. We mentioned it earlier. I don't know if you were in when we talked about this. So Jim, he's not just representing some random person, and he's not even just representing his friend.
Right.
He's representing his friend for killing his son, who Jim represented before and knew well, called him his friend in closing.
Right.
Is there, I mean, I don't want to call it like a conflict, but that is different. I don't know that I've ever seen that before. What do you think about that?
I wouldn't have touched that with a 10-foot pole. Like I would not have. I agree. I was curious about that relationship because, going into it, I wasn't sure. I didn't know if Harpootlian was from down around there. I didn't know. You know what I mean? And then it became clear to me very quickly that Griffin was in that area, that he was an attorney down there, that he was a friend of the family. That so I didn't know that going in, and as that became more and more apparent, I had just tweeted today, I'm like, the worst thing that you can do in the world as an attorney is represent your family or your friends. You know how it is, especially from the defense side of it, you never do it right. They're never happy with you, no matter what. If you get I get a NG on a case, they're still mad about something, so they're never happy. And if it's your family or your friends, it's even worse. And then you have that internal conflict where you have this close relationship with somebody, which certainly would cloud your ability to be able to act as a professional in some sense. I mean, it's like where I would make a decision one way with a client that I had no relationship with in terms of being, just his attorney, where I have a personal relationship. It may sway me to do something that I wouldn't otherwise do, or I would advise against, just because that person's like, man, you got to do this for me. You know what I mean? So
about the relationship with Paul.
Who? No, it's Paul and Alec. I have the impression, I'm under the impression that he knew Alec pretty well too. I think I think that he went to Alex went to Jim and said, man, I need you to help me with Paul. I'm sure that's how it went, and I'm sure that they were friends. It's a small area. And it's all the.
I think Jim knew Paul his whole life. Because they were so close.
Exactly.
That's why he was so emotional in the closing, because he literally knew this kid since he was born.
It was the most powerful part of his closing when he talked about Paul.
Without quite that one little voice crack at the end, man, was the most powerful part of the entire closing. That's the only part that got to me. You know what I mean? Right when I heard that crack, I'm like, oh man, and I felt myself whine. But I'm a softie, so I'm an easy crier. So yeah, no, man, I think that it was a bad choice in terms of, because of that. I think that it probably and I think that if Jim was closing for somebody that he didn't know, that it would have come off more. I think he felt a different type of pressure because of that relationship.
Yeah.
It's just you have to, because we're humans. We're all human beings. It's people always we're not robots. We're all human beings. We all have feelings. We all bring that into our jobs, and we bring that out, and we care about what we're doing. And, when it's highly personal for you, it's almost like defending yourself. You know what I mean? And which is the worst thing that you can do. It's the lawyer represents himself as a fool for a client thing. So it's kind of that same thing. You know what I mean? So I don't know, man. Like, to be honest, I don't think any lawyer could have gotten him off that. I think it played out the way it was supposed to play out. I think that the little detective's video, man, was kids solved it.
I
Like,
know. And that's just so sad. It just reminds me of the Delphi case. Like we've all wanted justice for so long in the Delphi case, and one of the victims caught video, right? That hopefully will nail the perpetrator. But that's what happened here, and it's just so sad on so many levels, and
it's awful.
Yeah, thanks for bring that back around, because like I know there's a lot of just crap said about Paul, and there's documentaries talking about, but like, no, not a single person deserves to be shot.
No, and you know what? And like, I get the sense of who probably Paul was, like in terms of pulling that, like it's my boat thing. I could see him being that guy, but he's an 18, 19-year-old kid. Like I don't think he was a fundamentally bad human being. I mean, he certainly is the spawn of Alec, though.
He's a product of where he came from, right?
Exactly.
He wasn't born that way.
And of massive privilege. It's like that whole thing. Like you grow up in privilege like that, where you think that you're untouchable. It's like reality can be an awfully brutal slap in the face. And, that family just got it massively. And like you said, though, with Paul, though, no matter what he did in terms of kind of being a turd with his friends and just being that guy, like the people who seemed to care about him and loved him seemed like he was a genuinely good kid. And there's nothing excuses for what happened to him. Like you know what I mean? Like under any circumstances, that there's nothing that makes that okay, and for Maggie either.
What about Buster? I mean, you being the defense attorney, you get to know the family a lot better. Buster has obviously testified for the defense about how much he loves his father. He sat behind his dad. For me, just as a parent, when the guilty verdict was read, we've been in the courtroom for a lot of guilty verdicts that are read, and there's usually crying, very visceral crying from the family members in the background. It was silent. And what broke my heart was that, like, Alec never even looked back at Buster. I mean, he may have been too embarrassed, but what do you think is going through Buster's head?
That he mouthed, "I loved you" to Buster as he was getting brought through the door. It's okay, I love you. So I like either way, though, man, that kid.
I feel for Buster. I really do. I mean, he's lost his whole family.
Everybody. I mean, aside from John Marvin, who really, I'm sure John Marvin's going to be his rock for the foreseeable future. I mean, for as much as I detested Alec, I kind of actually liked John Marvin. I thought, it's like you never know how much of it's a sham, in terms of him being prepped for, but he came off like a very likable guy, but that may run in the family, that ability to be able to kind of woo people with their Southern charm and, that kind of like down to earth personality that they seem to have. And yeah, man, that kid is like, when you think about his life, because it's not just like moving forward. It's like everything that they had has now been stripped away, aside from the legacy and, the money, just everything, like his life for wherever he lives, people will always be looking and pointing and saying, man, there's the kid. Like, I don't care if he's in what state he's in. The kid's he's a huge ginger. He's like, to see him. He's completely noticeable, So it's like I feel terrible for him. It's devastating. I mean, I couldn't even imagine what that would be like, Like it's impossible for me to imagine that kind of trauma and just like devastating. Like he literally lost his entire family. Like in the blink of an eye, in a period of like 3.5, 4 years. It's like
the worst possible way, brutal murders, and like the most public trial of all time.
Like right. He loses his brother and his mother in that way, and then has to sit through this trial where his father is just made out to be the monster that he is for the world to see. It's like, man, the question I had, I'm like, all right, so if they're going to do victim statements tomorrow, is Buster going to get up there? And if you're Buster, what do you do? I had somebody tweeting me, Brett, like kind of when we were tweeting back and forth in there, when you jumped in, she was like, well, because I had said, well, I think that there's a slight possibility that Buster may at this point say, you know what, Dad, that time when I just came up there and testified on your behalf, that was the last thing that I was doing for you. And then like maybe he goes up there and just maybe it's cathartic for him to just go out like and just lay into him and say, you broke my heart. Like, I can't believe, you know what I mean? As opposed to asking the judge for mercy, which he's not going to give him anyway. If I was counseling Buster, I'd say, you know what, man, go up there and speak with your heart, whatever that may be. I mean, it's like, because that's the only way you're going to heal it all, and if that's saying, Dad, you're horrible. You destroyed me. Like, I can't tell you how much you've destroyed me. You've destroyed my life. You've destroyed our family. Just lay it out for him like that, because that's the truth. And you know what? That guy needs to hear it from the kid, the only living member of his family left. He needs to hear it from him. I'd love to see Buster get up there and give it to him like that. Because like that guy needs to sit and stew on that for a long time, for as long as he can, because that's punishment.
Yeah. Well, you've heard it, everybody. You've chanted for Bob. He's come on and he's given his prediction of what's going to happen in 10 hours, because we've now been on for 2.5 hours, and I'm afraid Brett might keel over if we don't let him go sleep.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you both.
No, Bob, it's always so great to hear your perspective, and I've loved your coverage on Long Crime. You're one of the few I can listen to. But
they do not tell me that I have any kind of an agenda, which is good, because I'd have a problem with that. Because I'm like you guys. I'm not, I try to give the straight dope. Like, I'm not big on, like, no one's going to tell me what to say. Otherwise,
you do. That's why everybody likes you so much.
I'll just be the counter, because we always have to have like a devil's advocate. Okay, so Bob is probably going to be right, but you've heard his prediction for tomorrow. I predict actually that Buster will give kind of the same milquetoast thing that he did for the defense, which is like, I love my dad. I've lost my mom and my brother. I have no one left in the world. Please don't make me lose my dad now. And it kind of stopped there. Like, I don't think it's going to go overboard. I think it's going to be pretty milquetoast, because in all honesty,
I think he doesn't talk.
There you go. Okay, so you have three options of what's going to happen tomorrow.
That's the other option. I actually agree with you, Alice. I think that's what's going to happen. What I want to see happen is what I said. Like, that's what I
for him, for his therapy, I'd like him to say that. Yes. But I think that he's still a Murdaugh, and there's still a lot.
I agree.
And he probably is not free to say that, even if that's what he wants, because I think that this verdict is unfortunately not a surprise to either Alec or to Buster, or the rest of the family.
And like we all think, there's probably still money out there somewhere, and he's going to need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyways, so Bob, thank you for joining us. You finally gave the people what they wanted, and Allison, it's good to hear from you too, even if we didn't get to see you.
Alice, I wish you all the luck. I hope your baby is healthy and happy, and I hope everything goes well during the birth. So
thank you. For those who are joining the chat, like 5 weeks late, no, the baby's still inside. Thank you, Bob. I really appreciate it. Thanks for keeping Brett company when I may or may not be around. But we love you guys. Thank you. 1,000 of you have stayed on to listen to Bob, because we love Bob. And until next time, Bob, you get to sign off too. I'm Al.
I'm Bob. Oh.
And I'm Bro.
See you all.
And this is the prosecutor's legal briefs.
So it's just the Alice show now. Guys, I ran over here so fast that almost walked the baby out, but the baby's still in for like another day or two. So I'm so excited that you guys are here. We got the verdict like when Brett, I think we were both with our kid. I almost dropped my toddler because I was like, hold on, Mom needs to go watch the verdict. And they were like, what's a verdict? I was like, justice is about to be done. Brett, stop laughing. I'm literally, nobody knows why you're laughing.
Okay, that was the weirdest thing. I'm not sure what happened.
All I have to say is I think everyone's on Alice's side and everyone thinks you're drunk.
Hey, I am not drunk. I'm happy to leave.